Hi, I'm Max Brantley of the Arkansas Times on Wednesday, February 25th. Another snow day, but it was a lot worse in Fordyce than it is in Little Rock today. Not much is sticking, I'm happy to say. Let me take a phrase from Martin Luther King Jr. Sometimes the arc of the moral universe does bend toward justice. At least during the last 24 hours in Arkansas, there have been some significant developments that are better than some in previous days. First of all, the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning approved a bill to repeal the death penalty in Arkansas. It was on a voice vote. I think it was led out of the committee by the chairman by agreement. I don't think we can expect the Republican Senate or the Republican House, should by some miracle it pass the Senate, be ready to repeal the death penalty, but at least we had a full discussion in the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning. It was led by the sponsor, David Burnett, who was the judge in the infamous West Memphis 3 case. He's prosecuted death penalty cases. He's imposed death penalties. He says the death penalty doesn't work. Other prosecutors say they need to keep the death penalty. It's a tool for bargaining. Somebody else has commented that using the death penalty justification through procedural means doesn't make much sense. We should look at its effectiveness and its fairness, and in neither cases it seemed to work. But it was a good discussion this morning. On the gay rights front, some positive news for a change. The Conway City Council last night adopted an ordinance that will give equal protection to all its city employees. It's not a citywide civil rights ordinance, but it does guarantee equal protection to its employees. Mayor Tab Townsend deserves a vote of congratulations for getting this done. There was an outrage of opposition from the heavy religious conservative community that exists in Conway, including Senator Jason Rapert and State Representative David Meeks. They think it's a violation of their religion if somebody else gets equal treatment even though they're gay. They simply favor discrimination against gay people. It's too bad. But more good news in that same Senate Judiciary Committee. Again, it's a committee that's half comprised of Democrats, and so that gave it an edge. They defeated Bob Ballinger's bill, the so-called conscience protection bill, that again would allow people to use a religious defense in the name of discrimination, whether being in employment, in housing, or any other method of commerce. They tried to add an amendment to make it somewhat better. Governor Asa Hutchinson said yesterday he thought the bill went too far, had unintended consequences. Certainly there was testimony from cities and counties that these kinds of bills in other states have created huge legal headaches for cities. There was a city that was sued by a Buddhist temple because it didn't want parking regulations enforced against it, that sort of thing. The bill was defeated. The bill can be called out of committee by a simple majority of the vote of the Senate. I don't think we've seen the end of it, but at least it was good news for one day. And also yesterday, federal judge Christine Baker seems ready to move on the federal case over same-sex marriage. She agreed with the motion from plaintiffs in the case that it was time to consider vacating her stay of her order. She's ruled the ban on same-sex marriage unconstitutional, but stayed it pending further appellate decision. But she may be ready, as many other courts in the United States have been, to lift the stay and allow marriage equality to come to Arkansas. The state Supreme Court of Arkansas, it still dithers. Elsewhere in the news, I turned up an interesting story this morning. There's a bill that's going to be considered by the legislature that is going to put some regulation on commercial dog breeders. Arkansas has a terrible reputation as home to poorly run puppy mills, places where dogs are kept in abysmal conditions. We had a huge raid last week in Warm Springs where 46 dogs were taken in by the Humane Society in just unspeakable conditions. Well, it turns out there's a leading opponent of this legislation. It turns out he heads an agency that works to represent commercial dog breeders against just this sort of regulation. And when you know it, he has a seat in the Arkansas legislature. His name's Maurice Richmond. He hadn't responded to my questions yet. He sounds an awful lot like a lobbyist. That wouldn't be legal, of course, but it wouldn't be the first time a state legislator had voted his financial interest from the floor of the House. It bears watching. Interesting story in Arkansas business today about the resolution of a big property dispute between a brother and sister in Arkansas and Jefferson counties. George Dunklin Jr. and his sister. Looks like it's going to be settled by him buying out her share of a family farm for maybe as much as $75 million. We've used this as an occasion to talk about how commercial agricultural land is terribly underassessed for tax purposes. They get a tax break that other property doesn't get. If this property that just sold for $75 million had been taxed at what it's worth, it would have been worth something like $700,000 a year to the schools in Jefferson and Arkansas County. They only get pennies on that amount. We've rounded up the final details on the triple deaths in Maumelle last Friday night. 3 people found shot to death in a burning house. The police have concluded it was a murder-suicide, that James Wilbanks killed his wife, killed his sister, killed 2 dogs, and then killed himself. The mystery is why. They've talked to family and friends. They can't find any good reason. They think the family was pretty normal until Friday night. The University of Arkansas Razorback football team has a new running backs coach, Jamal Singleton. We don't talk much about football here, but I'm always interested when they hire another high-priced assistant. Singleton, who's been coaching at Oklahoma State, is going to make $310,000 a year. This gives us about a $6 million football coaching staff. If that doesn't get us into the championship games, I don't know what will. Shoppers alert, the Outlet Mall in Pine Bluff, the first in the state, is going to open October 16th. And what else is there for us? I had something to talk about. One other piece of good news. A pair of high-flying twins from Cabot High School had a huge feature in the New York Times. Young girls are challenging the national record in the pole vault, and if that's not good news, I don't know what is. I'm Max Brantley. Sorry for the mess up there. Must be the snow. See you tomorrow.